Hello, everybody, and welcome to the VBS Tech Conference. My name is Pete Morrison. I'm very excited to welcome you all here. This is our first ever online tech conference. Today, I'm being joined by both Mark and Ollie. Guys, if you could turn on your video for a second, please. I'm Pete. That is Ollie, and this is Mark. Hey, guys. So it's the first time we're doing this. I'm actually recording this or presenting this from my house. This is my house. So it should all go well, technology and bandwidth permitting. If you can't see the screen clearly, that's okay. We are going to be uploading all of this. I'm actually recording my screen and we'll upload this hopefully before the end of today, so you can watch it on YouTube in HD if you need to. Okay, so this week it's all about VBS4. So if we just have a look at the agenda here, right now we're in this first session, Training Made Easier, Faster Global, VBS4 Introduction and Overview. And it's going to go for about 1 hour. I've got about 1 hour worth of content, and then we'll take your questions. Just a bit of a heads up about Demio, the system that we're using. You should see a chat box. And it's a private chat. So any messages you send will only be seen by our moderators, Mark and Ollie. So you can send the messages. You can ask questions at any time. Just type the question, fire it off. And when we get to the very end, about an hour through, we're going to go through and start to answer those questions for 15 or 20 minutes. And we'll be uploading all those answers to YouTube as well. And I'll keep reminding people about that private chat box there, just in case people join late. And then tomorrow on Wednesday, we're doing a deep dive into VBS Geo, VBS Plan, and the VBS Control AI. I'll be hosting that as well. And then on Thursday, we're going to look at VBS for integrators, looking at the SDKs, looking at AR and VR, as well as talking about the new content tools for bringing 3D content into the game really, really quickly. Okay, so let's get started with this session. So I should have introduced myself properly. My name's Pete Morrison. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here at Bohemia Interactive Simulations. I manage the long-term product roadmaps. I work with some fantastic engineers and I work with our customers, military organizations all around the world. I really love my job. Before I was the CEO of the business back in the day. Before that, I was the lead developer of VBS2. And before that, I was in the Australian Army as a Signals Corps officer. So that's me. So we're going to run through some slides and I'll talk about the technology at a high level. And then we're going to do a live demo for about 35 minutes. We're going to try and do as much of this as we can live because the technology is in great shape. And I'm really excited to show some of that to you. Okay, so first off, a little bit about Bohemia Interactive Simulations. So we're primarily a software developer. So we don't do much integration. We don't build big simulator systems. We build complex simulation software primarily for military organizations. Our flagship product, VBS3, is used in over 50 countries. It trains hundreds of thousands of soldiers around the world. Our commercial baselines have been largely funded by you, our customers. The US Marine Corps, the Australian Defence Force, the US Army, the Brits, the French, the Canadians, the Swedes, over the last 15 years have all chipped in and added new features and capability that we've rolled into the VBS baseline. And all of these have been carried on through to VBS4 as well. We have 190 software engineers in the business. They're our most important employees. We're almost 300 strong in total. We have offices around the globe. In the top right here, you can see the Australian office, our most awesome office, and our Czech office here in Prague is also pretty cool. We're owned by a private equity firm, and this is really important. We're owned by the Riverside Company. They're an amazing owner, and they've really allowed us to invest in our technology. We've been able to rebuild our engine. We've been able to rebuild our AI and build a new world server using their funding to meet all of these new emerging requirements that we see, for example, one world terrain. And so it's really exciting that this technology is all coming onto market this year. And we've faithfully served NATO and NATO allies for over 15 years. And in fact, we only exist because of funding from those types of organizations. So today we're going to talk a bit about our technology. On the left, we have VBS4. It's a complete replacement for VBS3, a whole Earth virtual desktop training capability and simulation host. And We're going to release it, the Ready for Training release in July. So I've got a short video here just to kind of remind you how our technology is typically used for collective tactical training. I'm not going to let this video run very long. It's just to kind of give you some context and remind you how VBS is typically used.
VBS3.
So this is obviously a classroom full of
simulation uses.
The important men and women who are actually using the tools for tactical training. So one soldier or Marine per computer, and they're playing through some kind of scenario to get some kind of training benefit. And you don't use this type of training to teach a soldier how to disassemble a machine gun. You use this type of technology in order to do cognitive learning, how to think training. You set up a situation and the soldiers need to solve it. They need to use communication, the assets at hand, and it's really about rehearsing real life situations in the game. And VBS has proven fantastically successful and has proven to work in this type of training environment. So just going to go back to the slide deck quickly here. And then we have other technology, add-on technology, if you will. So VBS Blue IG is an image generator that contains the rendering portion of VBS4. But I'll point out that in our model, VBS4 contains everything you need in order to conduct tactical training. So you don't need to buy an image generator or buy a sim host. Everything you need is included in VBS4. And I've just got a slide here just to describe what I'm talking about with regards to simulation host and image generator. Maybe not everybody is familiar with those terms. So here we have, for example, a flight simulator. And so the simulation host runs on the computer and it's simulating the virtual world. A simulation is a model that changes over time. So all the physics of the vehicles, the ballistics of the rounds, that's all simulated on the simulation host. And the image generator is the eyes onto the simulation and the eyes onto the virtual world. It visualizes the virtual world. And in our concept, VBS4 includes both of these things. So unlike a lot of military technology, you don't need to go and buy these different components. It's all there for you, ready to go. But if you're building a simulator and you just need the visuals, then that's what VBS Blue IG is for. And VBS4 can either run the IG or it can run its own rendering. And of course, the user interface is the equipment that the operator touches in order to interface with the simulation. So there's a little bit more technology here that we'll talk about as we get into this brief. So the VBS World Server, it is a terrain server that streams data to VBS4 and VBS Blue IG, but also so much more. And I'm going to talk about that later in this brief and really deep dive into that during the VBS Geo section tomorrow when we do that separate brief. The SDKs, software development kits to extend and customize the software, and Terra Tools, it allows you to create large area terrains which you can import into VBS4, VBS Blue IG, or the VBS World Server. So yeah, we'll talk about that as well. I do want to make the point that for VBS4, you don't need any of this other stuff on the right. You know, if you want to use VBS4 in a similar way to VBS3, you can just load it on a computer, load your terrain data locally, and just run it. But the VBS World Server especially will help you, and I'll talk about that if you want to use it. So VBS4 is a whole earth virtual desktop trainer and simulation host that allows you to create any imaginable military training scenario. I used to call VBS3 a virtual sandbox, and VBS4 it's a virtual sandbox, but a really big virtual sandbox. And the engine actually supports multiple planets. In the first VBS4 release in July, we're obviously just providing Earth because it's the most pertinent, but we could build out additional planets later if we need to, and you never know. So VBS4 scenarios can be fully virtual, i.e. every single entity can be human controlled, fully constructive, which means that every entity is AI or computer generated, or a mix of both. And this is a really important distinction between VBS3 and VBS4. Now in VBS3, if you've used it, typically supported kind of platoon and company, and you really did have to use human in the loop. You couldn't trust the AI too much to replace human behavior. In the new product, VBS4, first off, we've enabled the ability to simulate much more. So we can do 2,000 to 2,500 entities, battalion to small brigade in the first VBS4 release, and we'll scale that up further in later releases. And in addition, we've got new AI that can start to replace those human operators. So it's a much more efficient tool for administrators. Now, VBS4 supports hundreds of training use cases. It does everything that VBS3 did plus some, and you can import your VBS3 terrains, scenarios, and content into VBS4. And when we get to the live demo, I'm actually going to show you a VBS3 terrain in VBS4. So why VBS4? Well, first off, you can train anywhere on Earth. As you'll see during the demo, you can jump to Africa, Australia, Europe, and just begin training in that location. And the terrain data is either loaded locally or from the world server. There is new capability to increase the speed of scenario creation. So the new VBS plan mode within VBS4 is much, much faster to build these kind of big synchronized maneuvers. We had one of our best engineers, Kevin, some of you might know him, do a test. We had him build out a combat team scenario with synchronization. In VBS3, it took over 2 hours. And in VBS4, it took a few minutes. It was something like a 30-time increase in speed using the new VBS plan mode to build out these complex scenarios. VBS Geo in VBS4 replaces the old Visitor 4 from VBS3. It's about 10 times as quick to build a similar size terrain. There's no separate applications. You're doing all your terrain editing here in VBS4, and you can just start simulating on that terrain immediately. If you use the VBS World Server, you centralize all your terrain data. So you don't need to copy terrain files to each individual computer. You can just load it all once. And we also save battle spaces. I'll talk about that on the World Server. And the World Server also provides a VBS4 dedicated server. So it does a lot of stuff that previously you had to do manually, and that can really save you time. I already spoke briefly about our new artificial intelligence, which I believe can start to reduce the need for human operators, especially for Op4, and of course it does everything VBS3 does and more. So I have a short video here talking about the actual VBS Blue engine. I'm really quite happy with how this engine has come together. I just have to turn the sound off here again. So we've been building this for a few years now. We made the decision to build this engine from the ground up to meet these emerging military requirements that we saw. For example, one world terrain, the ability to ingest any type of terrain data, operate a scenario anywhere on the planet. So we, unlike some of these military simulation companies, we didn't really take our old tech and try to bend it to meet this new requirement. We actually invested in a brand new game engine to do this. We built it from the ground up using the latest rendering technologies. We have more than 50 biomes. We simulate real-world tree density. We do accurate path planning. We do collisions with any one of those entities. So all the trees that you can see in this video, you can collide or destruct any one of them. And there are billions of them on the virtual Earth. We have theoretically unlimited view distances. Of course, you have fog and a horizon, which affects your view distance, but we've tried to make it as realistic as possible. So this underlying engine, we think, is really well suited to the military. And as I'll point out when we get to the world server slide, all of the magic that you're seeing here in the screen, this procedural refinement, can be shared with other runtimes via the world server. So let's talk about that a bit now. So going back to the slides again. So procedural refinement, it's a really interesting technology for programmatically increasing the level of fidelity in a scene. So many computer games are doing that these days. If you've played Star Citizen, Kerbal Space Program, No Man's Sky, then you've experienced this. They're taking relatively low fidelity source data. In our case, it's say a 30-meter height field, OpenStreetMap data, forestry data, and making that terrain look really sexy. Is one way to describe it. And it gives a really nice, realistic view from space all the way down to ground level and indeed to the bottom of the ocean in the case of VBS Blue. And this is really important because if you're a soldier operating here in this virtual terrain, then you are going to really want this kind of fidelity. I mean, it could literally save the life of your virtual entity. And so our new engine supports this. But furthermore, we are doing this procedural refinement on our terrain server. This is not just a cute engine trick that's going to lock you into VBS. Any runtime can connect to the world server and download correlated terrain at this level of fidelity. And I'm going to talk in detail tomorrow about how that actually works. We've connected the VBS World Server to Cesium, which is a browser-based tool, to MCIS, and to other rendering engines. So we're really proud of our approach, and we think it's really unique in this market. So here we can see the prepare, execute, and assess workflow that underpins VBS4. I'm about to get into the live demo where this is going to make a lot of sense. You might be wondering, where is plan? In the military training paradigm, it's plan, prepare, execute, and assess. Well, we believe you should be doing your planning in your MCIS, your Mission Command Information Systems, or your battle management systems. Train like you fight. And what we've done in VBS4 is made it possible for you to import that into VBS4 in the MSDL format. We demonstrated this with the US Army over a year ago now, where a Citaware HQ battalion level plan was imported into VBS4. That brings in the boundaries, it brings in the start position, it brings in the ORBATs, and you can just start from there in VBS4. So in the prepare phase, you set up your scenario, you use VBS Geo and VBS Plan and the editor to make tweaks. And then you might do your radio network setup here using VBS Radio. You might connect VBS4 to external simulation using VBS Gateway. Now I'm throwing a lot of names here of modes and technology. Everything that I've described is included in the product. It's just a single install, a VBS4 install that includes all of this. You then execute first person, third person, or from a commander viewpoint, conduct the training, and then of course you assess using the after action review. So we're going to transition now and we're going to do a live demo of VBS4. Now, the first thing we're going to do is load up the application. So I'm just sharing my screen here. And we're going to go across to the VBS4 launcher and we're going to start VBS4. Now, we're sharing my screen and I'm at home. So what this is going to mean is that it's not going to be really clear for you. I'm going to try and move the camera slowly. We did do the same session this morning. It worked okay. So if you can't see things clearly at first, don't worry. It should get better. And if you get too frustrated, then keep in mind that I'll be uploading this entire session to YouTube and you can watch it in HD at the resolution of my screen. All right, so VBS4 here has loaded. Now this is a development build. It's the 20.1 release. It's work in progress software, so I have to give the disclaimer. This hasn't been properly QA'd. I just worked with the developers to get the latest tech to show it to you. So I've rehearsed it, we've had no problems, but you know how this goes. I think I'm presenting to 100 people. If something's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong now. Anyway, let's kick into the demo. So VBS4 is loaded. It loads in between 10 and 15 seconds. We're pulling in all of this data that you see on the screen from the world server, which is on a separate computer here on my local area network. So this is the main menu that users will see. We're currently operating from an admin perspective. We have the ability to do search, so we can kind of search for a specific location on Earth. And this is searching the VBS world server. So Coffs Harbour is my hometown in Australia. We don't need internet access. We can just search the world server for any location on Earth. We have various help functions here, so orbit camera controls. We can access our options centrally. So unlike VBS3 where you had to kind of dig for the options, in VBS4 they're available via this top bar in most modes. And on the left here we have our list of battle spaces. So we're going to get into the workflow in a little bit. For now we're just going to look at some different locations on the Earth. So I've just clicked on Athens. The virtual camera is going to move us there. Now you're going to see this a lot throughout this demo, that it takes a couple of seconds for the terrain to page in from the world server. And we think that that's acceptable. Once the terrain is loaded, it's going to be much quicker. But you've got to remember that for somewhere like Athens, we have thousands, tens of thousands, potentially even millions of individual buildings that are streaming in from the world server. It's a lot of data. But it's working quite well. And we've also containerized the world server. We can stream this data from the cloud if that's where you want to host the world server. All right, so the terrain here has now paged in and we can kind of come down here to ground level and we'll just have a look at some of the detail and the terrain is still loading. It's going to load up the 3D trees. Now this biome that you can see here is specific to this part of the world here in Athens. The trees, the bushes, the grass, the flowers on the ground. We have taken real world data and we've created thousands of different vegetation models to populate this virtual Earth. And my moderators are telling me that it is quite choppy and like I said, it should improve. Don't panic if you can't see it. Once we upload it to YouTube, it'll look much better. And you can see here that we've extruded these buildings from the OpenStreetMap data and we've textured them with a regional texture. If we zoom the camera out a little bit further, then you'll see what I was talking about earlier with regards to theoretically unlimited view distance. So we can see the mountains off in the distance, and if we come up even higher, we'll see the curvature of the Earth. And you can see we've almost got a seamless transition from up in the atmosphere all the way to ground level. Let's go over now to San Francisco. So we've jumped to the other side of the planet here. The camera is just seamlessly transitioned over, and we're just going to wait for this terrain to load. We're going to be located around about the San Francisco airfield. So the guys have asked me to turn off my video, which I'll do to try and help with the upload speed. And we're going to go now in to just have a look at lighting within the new engine. So don't worry about the workflow just yet. We'll come back to that. All we're doing right now is looking at different features within the engine. Okay, so here we are. We've loaded up this editor temporarily so I can change some of the scenario settings. We're just going to bring the camera up a little bit higher here. And we can do all the airports on Earth procedurally. So we use a vector data store for that, and that includes everything down to the runway markings, which I know you probably can't see at this altitude. So we're going to go in now and just tweak our scenario settings to turn it to nighttime. So it's now 1:30 in the morning. It's going to take just a few seconds for our virtual eyes to adjust. And you'll see that we also have runway lighting, geospecific runway lighting, and we're also simulating lighting for entire cities. And this is very, very important to us. We want to make sure that regardless of time of day or weather condition, we can give you a really nice picture of Earth kind of way out into space. And we'll be doing every city on Earth at this kind of fidelity. And now if we zoom in and kind of come closer down to the ground, it's going to be a little bit choppy as the terrain is loading in as we're moving across this area of the Earth for the first time. We can come all the way down and we can see that what we're actually rendering here is every street light on this virtual Earth. So all those lights that we saw up from high altitude were actually street lamps that we were rendering in the rendering engine. And if we change the time of day here, so we're going to go back now to our scenario settings, set our time. You probably see as we kind of get closer to morning, we see more lights start to come on. So we're simulating people starting to wake up. And now, of course, we're into daylight. So quite a powerful engine from a rendering perspective. And I would point out again that here in San Francisco, if we move over to one of the more lit areas, maybe over here into the bush, we again have a biome that is specific to this part of the Earth. So the small plants, the grass, the trees, and the bushes are all kind of specific to this part near San Francisco. And you can see that we're doing the entire city. As we look out here, we can actually see the entire city. Rendering a scene like this in VBS3 would have just been completely impossible. There are quite literally thousands of buildings here. All right, so this is typical of what's in the baseline of VBS4. And we can provide you with buildings for the entire planet from OpenStreetMap if you need that. So we're going to go back now to the main menu here, and we're going to look at a different type of terrain. So we're going to go to Kingsville. It's another airfield. And what we've done here is we've actually used ultra high resolution imagery to texture the terrain. So I'll just leave it here for a second for the terrain to page in. I don't want you to think that you're fixed to using our procedural data to kind of render this terrain. So this is an ultra high resolution texture. We've still got our correct material mapping on the ground. And you'll see tomorrow when we do the VBS Geo demo that I'm going to do this live. You can bring in high fidelity data like this directly into the product and start using it immediately. And here we have another biome. This biome is typical to the southern kind of states in America, in the United States. Very, very thick, almost jungle terrain. And it's very important to us that we provide you with realistic tree density. If that's getting in the way of your training, we could potentially kind of scale that back programmatically. But out of the box, we do quite realistic tree density for everywhere on Earth. We're going to go to Arizona now, just to show a more kind of deserty terrain, something that looks completely different. I'm going to zoom in. Again, it's just going to take a few seconds for the terrain to page in. And again, here it's very different. We've got kind of salt bush and scrubby trees, typical somewhere in the desert in Arizona. Okay, so let's now have a look at the workflow. So we've bounced around the Earth. I've showed you a bunch of different locations that have been paged in from the world server. We're now going to go to Poland. So here we are in a Polish terrain. I'm going to just give it a few moments to page in the data. And so this particular terrain, it's a little bit of a combination of procedural data. So these buildings have been extruded. We've done a little bit more preparation. So for example, we actually have fields. This I believe is a wheat field once the data finishes loading in, represented here as well. And what we're going to do is have a look at the VBS4 workflow. So the workflow, we believe is fairly easy to use. Here's the prepare, execute, and assess. This is where we're going to create our training content. We're then going to execute it, and here we are going to actually watch an after action review. Now, these battle spaces are saved centrally on the VBS World Server if you're connected to the World Server, which is really a big improvement, I think, from VBS3. And in the 20.2 release at the end of the year, we'll actually support collaborative terrain editing. So you can have multiple administrators loaded into a battle space, each editing the terrain and kind of doing their own thing to further accelerate the development of content. So here we're going to open up VBS Geo, which is our first mode within VBS4. And what we can do, so I'm just going to position the camera and not move it too much. So I understand that it's extremely laggy. And again, I apologize for that, but there will be a video made available where it's going to look a lot nicer for you. So I'm just going to leave the camera here in a fixed position, and you'll see that we can quick switch between Geo, Plan, and Editor, which are the three editing modes within VBS4. So there's no separate applications here. It's all included. But I'll talk about this a bit more tomorrow. These are actually components. They're actually written in HTML. They're built in quite a modular way. So the first thing we're going to do is place down an op4 position. So we're going to just edit the terrain. We're going to create a trench line. So that's what I'm doing right here. So I've just drawn a trench line, and I'm just going to lower the terrain down. And you're not going to see it from this altitude. We're going to get down much lower in a minute, and you're going to see it up close and personal. We're then going to do some surface editing to change the surface of that trench to make it look a little bit more like dirt, as if the op4 had just dug it. So it's going to have a bare earth texture applied. And then we're going to place down some bunkers. So this is just a couple of clicks. I'm really not changing any of the settings. And the idea is that anyone can use this capability. You don't need special training to do it. We want you to be able to take any one of your soldiers, kind of give them a copy of VBS4 and VBS Geo, and they can start building useful content. So I've just placed down a couple of bunkers there. I'm going to get down a little bit closer so we can actually just observe the change that I've just made. So so from this position here, you can actually see the trench line and the bunker that we've placed. And you can see that we could not do this in VBS3. We're cutting into this terrain at quite high fidelity. We can actually dig into the terrain now in the new engine. We couldn't do this previously. We're going to do a deep dive in VBS Geo tomorrow, where I'll import content and do all sorts of fun stuff. For now, I can just place down some roads just to show you what that looks like. So we've just placed down a road here. I'm going to just move the camera now so we can actually look at that. Again, I know when I move the camera, it might be hard for you to see. So we've actually got a road that's been placed here, and it's dug into the terrain. It kind of cut through all those trees as well. And finally, we just do a little bit of surface editing. So if we come in here and we draw an area, just like this, we can, for example, change this to a very dense forest with just a couple of clicks. So with just a couple of clicks, I've just created this forest in this location. So it doesn't really matter how complex the terrain is. If it's buildings, if it's vegetation, we can place it down very quickly in this tool. Okay, so let's leave terrain editing there for a moment. So I'm moving very quickly, and we're going to dig into this in a lot more detail tomorrow. So now we're in the plan mode. So the idea here is that it's very quick and easy for anyone to create a military plan, which will then be executed in military simulation. So the first thing I'm going to do is place down some op4 units, and that's going to be a couple of op4 squads. So we'll place one here, and we will place one here. We're just placing down the military symbology right now. We're not actually placing down 3D units at this stage. will indicate that this is an objective. And what we're going to do next is place in we're going to do this quite high just so our camera stays nice and stable for you. We're going to place in our blue 4. So we're going to place in a friendly armored unit. So it's going to be an armored core platoon with M1s. We've placed down the symbol for it here. We've placed in a move order. And now we're going to place down a support by fire order as well onto the enemy objective. We're going to move over to the right. What we're going to do here is actually a mechanized infantry assault from the right, covered by the M1 Abrams. So again, we can just place down the military symbol for a mechanized infantry platoon. We can give it a move order, and then we can give it an assault order onto the objective. And we'll also place down a phase line, just like that, and we'll make that phase line trigger at 1 minute. Now if we zoom down here in the bottom of the screen, hopefully you can see the timeline, we can see the phase line and the movement orders, and we can actually scrub forward along the timeline to see where our units will be at any specific time. And I'm going to click Build Mission. And what that's going to do is create all of the content in 3D. So I'm very sorry that I didn't do that the first time. I just wasted at least 30 seconds of our video, of our session, but that's okay. So now I've clicked Build Mission. It's created all of the 3D content, and it's created all of their behavior and triggers for synchronization. So all of this is what you used to have to do manually in VBS3, and in VBS4 it all happens automatically for you. Okay, so we'll kick it off again. Hopefully it's going to be a bit faster this time, and we'll just watch the action play out for a little while. And then we'll move on to the next phase of the demonstration. Remember, while this is loading, feel free to ask any questions that you might have in the chat. For anybody who joined late, that chat is private between you and our moderators. And at the end, when we answer your questions, we'll be doing it completely anonymously. So you can ask whatever you like, and we'll do our best to kind of push through those questions. This morning we had over 80 questions, so we probably won't be able to get through all of them, but we'll do the best that we can. Okay, so the scenario here is kicked off. What I'm doing is just turning off some of the interface just so we can see the 3D content. So the M1 Abrams are going to form up and they're going to move to their support by fire objective. They will engage the enemy forces once they detect them. And this is all running using our new VBS Control AI. And while this is a relatively small scenario, just a couple of platoons, I will be talking later in the brief about how we've scaled this up to support over 2,000 entities for battalion and brigade level operations. And at the same time over here, we will see that our infantry units are forming up. They're actually mounting their Bradleys, and then the Bradleys will move to their assault position. Now, I will remind you that in VBS we simulate every single entity all the time. So we simulate the vehicle crew. If this vehicle got hit by an armor-piercing round, for example, it might just kill the driver. And it's quite high fidelity. So our Abrams have actually started engaging already. I caught them this time. I was a bit too slow this morning. They wrapped up this firefight very quickly this morning. But we can see here that they're engaged with the appropriate weapon system. In this case, it's their coax machine guns. And I think already they've killed most of the opposing forces on this objective. I will point out at this stage that the environment is deformable and destructible, and any deformation events, anything that really happens, will be promulgated out across the VBS World Server. So hopefully I can just give you a quick example of that just by placing down some fake artillery here. Let's just give that 5 seconds to see if that actually works. Yes, it does. All right, so what I've just done, just by way of demonstration, is I've created a couple of explosions just kind of randomly, and you can see that those explosions have cratered the terrain. So you can see here we have a crater kind of dug into the terrain. This is very different from VBS3 where the crater was on top of the terrain, and it's actually cleared out the vegetation around this explosion. And these deformation events will be sent out via the world server and shared with any connected runtime. So if you remember that the world server is runtime agnostic, we can actually connect any runtime engine into it, even like Unreal or Unity, then this means that we can support terrain deformation out to those connected runtimes as well, and we've demonstrated this in the past. So I do apologize at the quality of the stream. My guys are saying that for some reason it's worse than this morning. I do want to assure you that I'm running at 60 frames per second higher here on my computer, and you will see that in the YouTube recording. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go back to, just for my moderators, let me know if we should switch to the video rather than showing this live. If it really is that bad and it's impossible for our audience to see it, I'd rather switch to a video just so they can see what is actually going on. So send me a message if you think I should do that. Right, so now we're going to go back to the main menu as I watch Slack out of the corner of my eye to see what our moderators say. Now we're going to jump across to Japan. So Japan is yet another kind of built-out area in this particular version, and we're going to be operating here around this Japanese Japanese airport. So we're going to just let the terrain page in again, and you're going to see yet another biome. Like I mentioned, we have over 50 biomes in the first release of VBS4. I'm going to zoom in now just so we can get like a look at what that biome looks like at ground level. And so this is really like a tropical biome. You'll see that we'll have some bushes paging in a second and some grass. Very, very thick, difficult to navigate through, effectively impassable to vehicles. And for this demo, we're going to go into the execution mode. And we're actually going to run this little scenario off the dedicated server that the VBS World server provides. So this is going to take a few seconds to load in here. Now, the reason why we're going to show you this set of features is just to give you a reminder or an appreciation of the hundreds, if not thousands, of individual features that our customers have paid for over the years. So I feel like we spend a lot of time showing like the new capability. I do really just want to kind of show again that VBS4 will include all of the VBS3 capability, hundreds and hundreds of individual little features. And so what we're going to do now is have a look at VBS from the first person perspective and just explore what some of those features are in the baseline product. So here in VBS4, in this particular mode, I'm playing from the first person perspective. I have a personal weapon. I can look through the sights of my personal weapon. I can raise and lower my personal weapon. I can interact with the environment in various ways. So for example, if I come in here and I climb over this particular fence, then that's what I've done. I can do a small jump. This is not a computer game, so we can't bunny hop around like we can in Call of Duty, but you can still move around the environment fairly effectively. So what we have here is an environment that we can interact with. So I'm actually going to go in here. I'm going to press the I key, and we can take a weapon out of this ammo crate. So for example, if I want to equip a 9mm, and we can go to usable ammo, and I can equip a magazine for that weapon as well. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change to that weapon. So I've changed to my 9mm here. I obviously need to reload the magazine. And the reason I'm showing you this is, first off, we support thousands of individual weapon types, tens of thousands if you consider different weapon attachments. And we could fire this weapon, except I have the safety on. But for now, let's go back to our M4. And I do apologize for the quality of the stream. The guys are telling me that it's not getting much better. I'm just going to keep pushing through, and if you want to see this in more detail, you can watch the YouTube link a little bit later on. So here what we're going to do is just have a look at body dragging. There are many different ways you can do Casevac within VBS4. We can do litter carry. We can obviously do shoulder carry as well. And over here we have a soldier that is limping. And the reason we have a limping soldier kind of walking through the middle of this scenario is just to prove to you that we do this high fidelity wounding models. And we also have first aid as well. So if this person was hit with a sniper rifle, then he may lose a limb, and you can apply a tourniquet, you can treat snake bite, you can treat heat exhaustion, all through the VBS4 interface. And everything that I'm describing to you is simply included in the game. All right, so we'll run over here towards this machine gun. The first thing I'm going to do is just fire a couple of rounds into the air, because we're going to talk about ballistics now. Now, it's going to be very hard for you to see, I imagine, over the stream, but you might see different colors, and that is the ballistic trajectory of the rounds that we've just fired. We do quite accurate ballistics modeling, and it's very difficult to see. You'll probably see it in the YouTube stream, the blue in the very, very far distance as the rounds fall to earth. So now what we're going to do is fire at a couple of different material types. And so that's what we can see in front of us here. So we're coming in, we're going to fire through just some of these like this, just a couple of rounds in each. And we're going to run over now and have a look at what that looks like. So what you can see here is that the rounds from my assault rifle has only penetrated a couple of different surfaces, specifically the wood and the cloth. Now the cloth, if you can see, has red lines coming out of it because the ballistics was barely modified. The rounds just punched through that surface. But the wood, it's turned yellow. And that means that the rounds have slowed down more. So within this particular debug mode, the color of the line indicates how fast the bullet was moving. So the bullet slowed down significantly through the wood. And if we look over here in the trees, and this is going to be very hard to see on the stream, you might see some blue lines. And that's because the rounds are hitting the branches and the trees and ricocheting. And we simulate every single round that's fired, even if there's thousands of entities at very high level of fidelity, including ricochet. And again, here's some blue lines that show ricochet off the ground. And so, yeah, think about this at scale. When we're doing 2,000 entities, we're simulating every single round that every entity is firing at very high fidelity. So if we jump now into this machine gun, we're just going to fire the machine gun here at these different surfaces. Through the wood and just through the cloth. We're now getting out. And again, we are going to run over and have a look at what happened. And now this is quite interesting. Hopefully it's visible. You can see that the 50 cal is, the rounds were barely slowed down. They're still red. But one of the rounds actually penetrated this second beam and slowed down significantly, and its trajectory was significantly altered. So we're doing multiple layers of simulation here as the round passes through this surface. Now it's really important, and I've spent some time on this, because this same material properties have been applied to all of the 3D content in-game, which is obviously important for tactical training. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back to the real-time editor here. For those who aren't familiar with VBS3, we've actually got this real-time editor. We can change almost any aspect of the simulation at runtime using this interface. And yes, it's very similar to the VBS3 interface because we didn't want to force our users to have to learn a completely new interface with VBS4. So I'm going to turn off the shot trajectories because it's getting a little bit messy. And we're going to come back. First thing we're going to do is have a look at a UAV controller. So we have many different types of UAV simulation in the product with different thermal modes. We can laze targets, we can engage targets if the UAV actually has weaponry. So here we can actually see that we're in a UAV, and of course we could be at realistic altitudes, which we really couldn't do back in VBS3. Here in front of us we have a striker. So we're going to run up to the striker here and we're going to interact with it. And we're going to do a little bit of towing. So I'm actually just going to do a cross hitch here. This capability was paid for originally by the Swedes. So I've just tied those two strikers together. We're going to jump into the vehicle. We of course do render interiors of these vehicles and all of the crew positions. And I'm just going to move into the driver position. And we're just going to move along here and we're going to drive. We're obviously towing this striker behind us. And we could do vehicle recovery. One of our soldiers there just clipped through the back of it, but no problem. So yeah, we're doing vehicle recovery here. This was funded originally by the Swedes for vehicle recovery in snow layers. And it's just working here in VBS4 as you can see. So we're going to stop that now. We're going to go back into the real-time editor. Another feature that I'd like to show you is our material definitions for surfaces. So here you can see we have a helicopter. We can see some dust from the terrain. We're going to fly it across here over to the tarmac, and you'll see that the dust is going to stop. And this might seem like a minor thing, but it's pretty important, and we've done this for every single one of our 100 surface definitions on Earth, which means that in a desert you'll get a different amount of dust to what you might get on grassy fields or on a tarmac. Over here we have a soldier with a javelin. We're just going to switch into that soldier now. And now the purpose of VBS, as I may have mentioned earlier, it's not to train soldiers in the specific use of certain weapon systems. You're not going to use a VBS to train a javelin operator in the current version at least. But it's here to provide this asset for commanders to use in their training. So here, for example, I can just kind of step through the basic process of engaging with a javelin. So we're just seeking the target, holding down the right mouse button here while we lock onto the target. And now I can fire. So our javelin is taken off there, and hopefully I hit that tank. Yes, I hit that tank. You can tell that I used to be in the army. And you can see the ballistics curve for the javelin it's shown here. And so it doesn't 100% accurately simulate the javelin, but it's certainly good enough for tactical training and cognitive learning, giving the commander the asset in the game. So I'm going to show just a couple more features here, just to kind of remind everybody what VBS can provide. So the first one, we're going to turn on just a couple of demo things here. So we're going to click here and we're going to click here. So the first one, I'll just move the camera and leave it stationary in a second, is going to be complex animations. So that's what you're going to see here. You can incorporate a huge number, hundreds of different animations in your scenarios quickly using the editor. So these guys are having an argument, this person is pondering the meaning of life, this person is concerned about something, this person is using a phone, and we have higher fidelity civilian content as well in VBS4. And over here we have our CS gas simulation. So the soldier on the left is wearing an NBC suit, so he is protected from the CS gas. The soldier on the right is being severely affected by the CS gas. And we support sarin gas and a range of other different toxins. And this capability was actually funded by the Marines, and at runtime you can put on different NBC equipment. We'll turn on some wind. So I'm just toggling wind. So the wind now is obviously pushing that smoke away, and we can see the trees, or maybe you can't depending on the quality of the stream. You can see the trees moving in the wind. So we'll turn wind off. We're just going to come up a little bit higher and turn the camera around. And now what we're going to do is we're going to toggle the time of day. So we're going to skip time 12 hours and we're going to turn on night vision. So what you can see here is that my lights are on the striker, and that's illuminating the ground. We have this the beacon on top of the tank, and this long line, which maybe you can or can't see, is coming from a laze from an AC-130, which is way up at 20,000 feet or something. So really powerful night vision simulation, all done through a plugin in VBS4, and I just wanted to show that to you. All right, so let's turn that off. Or thermal imaging, I should mention as well. We do quite a powerful thermal imaging model. Here on the helicopter, for example, we can see the engine is heating up faster than other parts of the helicopter. Okay, so we're really nearing the end now. So what I'm going to do is make it daytime again. And for the last part of the demonstration, we're going to do a parachute drop. So we did a lot of work for SOCOM in VBS3, and we've been porting all of that capability forward into VBS4. So as you will see, I'm now in a C-130J. I'm sitting in the rear of the aircraft. For SOCOM, we did both parachuting, and we also did scuba diving. So I'm actually going to open up the ramp here. So we should see the ramp start to open up. Yep, so the ramp here is just opened up on this aircraft. And what I'm going to do is go back to first person. I'm going to get up. I'm going to walk to the back of the aircraft. In this case, I'm a Navy SEAL. I'm wearing my parachute, and I've got my scuba fins on as well. And we're going to parachute out the back of this aircraft. So out we go. We've jumped out the back of the C-130J, and we can actually move the soldier while we're falling. And we can check our altimeter if we're in first person. And we can move to the left, we can move to the right, we can actually stay in formation if we're in a network session here. And when we're ready, of course, we can open up our parachute. And we're still doing a little bit of work with this to bring it into VBS4, but you're going to see a work in progress interface here for flying under canopy. So just while this is getting ready for the next part of my demo, we support cargo drops out of the back of aircraft. We support a huge amount of logistics simulation within VBS, which I don't have time to go into today. It's actually a pretty good demo of the view distances within VBS4. Our airfield is actually way over there in the distance, and we can even navigate and fly around under canopy like you might be able to see here. Okay, so that wraps up the features demo. That was just a quick look at some of the hundreds of different features that we have in VBS4. As you can see, we're pretty far advanced when it comes to getting this product ready for release. So the last thing I want to show you now is an example import. So I mentioned earlier that you can import VBS3 terrains into VBS4. You do this by a new tool. It's very easy. You simply drag your VBS3 terrain onto the tool and it'll kind of import it into VBS4 for you. So this is the town of Serrani. If you've used VBS3, then it might look familiar to you. It's perfectly correlated with VBS3, and in fact, if we move over to where, here, again, it probably won't come through on the live stream, but on YouTube, you'll be able to see this. We're actually using the lower resolution terrain grid that VBS3 uses in order to make sure the correlation is perfect with VBS3. So you'll be able to import your own VBS3 terrains, your own VBS3 scenarios, and your own VBS3 content and use it in VBS4. Obviously, you need to enter a latitude and longitude for the origin of the terrain, and for whatever reason, the developers decided to put Serrani directly in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, so that ends the live demo. We're going to go back and just finish up now with some slides. I do apologize if the quality of that stream was not good, and I do encourage you to look at the YouTube version a bit later on. Okay, so I've turned my webcam back on, and let's just kind of wrap up here with just a few slides. So the new artificial intelligence in VBS4 is extremely powerful. We're going to do a deep dive into this tomorrow. I just wanted to kind of give an overview of it because I didn't get to demo it live. So if we just kind of fast forward a little bit, you'll see some of that. So pattern of life, civilian traffic, all of this is included in the VBS4 baseline. It's not a separate product like it was in VBS3. So you can create a quite realistic crowd behavior with fleeing behavior. And you can set up a military convoy as well that moves through that terrain. So for example, I'm just kind of moving forward here very, very quickly. It's probably driving you all crazy, but I am running out of time. So what you're about to see is a military convoy that is moving through that civilian pattern of life. They're obeying road rules, they're obeying traffic lights, they're not running anybody over, and this is all included in the baseline. You'll also get a correct reaction to contact as well. And the last feature I want to talk about with AI is AI on Rails. And when I was talking previously about reducing human operators, this is one of the tools that will help you do that. You can precisely define AI behavior to do things like a complex ambush, for example. You can specify specific locations that the AI will occupy, and you can set up branch points depending on what happens in the scenario. So this is a very powerful capability that's also included in the baseline. We're now going to go back to the slides. I want to talk about scalability just quickly. So scalability, we've been working on now for quite a while. We're very excited. In the first release of VBS4 in July, you can do 2,000 entities in a massive battle, like a battalion or a small brigade. We've already demonstrated this in a demonstration to the US Army. So for example, if we just load up the scalability video, this video is actually on YouTube. And what you're going to see here is we've created this small Blue 4 brigade versus an Op 4 battalion in the VBS plan technology. It took about 1 hour to create this particular scenario. It was quite complex, but it's all been synchronized and there are multiple phase lines. And what you're about to see is just that fast forward so we can see where all the units will be in accordance with the timeline. And all of those 2,000 entities are being simulated at very high fidelity. They're doing correct path planning. You can see every soldier is simulated. They actually debus and conduct the assault. The path planning is correct. They're path planning correctly. They're using dead ground. They're taking up appropriate fire positions. And on this particular example, that's 11.5 kilometer frontage with thousands of entities operating at this level of fidelity. And we were at 60 frames per second when we were running this simulation. So we're very excited about this. This is what you can do in the July release. We also support larger number of civilian entities. We have 2,000 VBS entities here in this particular sample. The engine itself is capable of supporting up to 5,000 entities. Mark is going to go into this on Thursday, but what you're seeing on the screen is 5,000 entities, civilian entities, with a very kind of dense crowd behavior. So you can do things like stadium evacuation in VBS4. You just simply couldn't do that previously. And let's just go back to the slides quickly if I remember where I should be clicking. We are rapidly scaling this capability up as well. So in the 20.1 release in July, you can containerize the world server, but we're still operating in a distributed manner using simulation clients. We're working towards this fully cloud-enabled architecture where we'll containerize the workers for simulation and artificial intelligence as well. And we should get tens of thousands of entities using this approach. And this is us working on our own in order to implement this. And we're very excited by the progress so far. And really our primary drive is to make sure the fidelity stays high at all times. A lot of constructive simulation kind of aggregates the problems away. We really want to tackle that ultra high fidelity to give the ability, for example, for a human-controlled platoon or company to operate within a battalion or brigade level context with all of the surrounding elements operating in a fairly realistic way. So that's a brief mention about scalability. I will point out that VBS4 includes the entire content library of VBS. That's something like 16,000 individual models, 8,000 moving models. We're building a lot of additional content now, Chinese, Russian assets, additional civilian assets that will be included in the release in the middle of the year. So a massive content library which we just include with the product. A couple of words about the world server and then we'll get into questions. So I'm going to dig into this tomorrow. So if you're interested in this, I encourage you to come to tomorrow's session. So the world server, it streams terrain data down to VBS4 and VBS Blue IG, but it is at its heart an engine agnostic terrain server. I'll talk about it tomorrow, but we can pull in any type of data that Terratools supports into the world server. So we can bring in, for example, in the top right, this is Microsoft Bing. We can bring in Vricon, I'll talk about that in a second. And we can export this to VBS, or we can export it to a different runtime engine. So that could be Unity or Unreal, maybe via FBX. It could be Cesium, maybe just web tiles. It's a very, very powerful terrain server capability. And we did that very intentionally to make sure that this procedural goodness didn't exist only in our engine. We want to give you as much flexibility as we can. And I mentioned Vricon data. Here's just some screenshots. Of course, we support Vricon data. Pretty much everybody does. We can import this directly at runtime, or we can import this in an offline process. But what we do that's a bit different to most, we actually prepare the data for simulation as well. So you can have entities actually walking on the data, vehicles driving, aircraft colliding into this 3D data. It's very easy to visualize the data. It's more difficult to simulate on it. We can simulate it on it as well. So we include all of the VBS3 capability in VBS4. I feel like I've mentioned that. You're not going to have time to read this during the live stream. We will make the slides available, or you can watch the YouTube version, which we're going to post hopefully tonight to the website. But lots of good reasons why VBS3 has kind of improved dramatically on VBS4. All right, so 2 slides and then we're into the Q&A. So first off, our plan for releases. So we are releasing the first Ready for Training VBS4 version in July, in just a couple of months. That will be a complete replacement for VBS3. You can uninstall VBS3, import your VBS3 terrain, scenarios and content into VBS4 and start training. VBS Geo and VBS Plan will be robust. It will support data import into VBS Geo, and I'm going to show that tomorrow morning. It's very, very powerful. And we're doing further improvements in the engine. So one of those cool improvements is seasonal biomes. So that's what you can see on the screen here. You can see that we've taken the leaves off trees during winter. During spring and summer, you can see the fields are planted. During autumn, they are not. And in winter, they're covered in snow. And all of this happens at runtime. So we're not loading different terrain data. There's no pause. If you set the season in the VBS scenario editor to be winter, then we apply the winter biome automatically, which is a cool feature in 20.1. We're also doing things like build-up of water as a result of precipitation, and really making sure that the rendering engine keeps pace with modern graphics technologies. System requirements, I'm not going to go into the detail. They're there on the screen. You can ask questions if you'd like. The idea is that VBS4 can run on any gaming computer made in the last kind of 4 years. It works better on newer machines, obviously, and we really recommend an SSD, a solid state drive. It will work on a hard disk drive. It's just that the terrain paging will be a lot slower. And obviously we do leverage graphics card capability, both in VBS4 itself, but also on the world server. And the reason for that will become clear tomorrow when we talk about what the world server is actually doing. Okay, so that's the end of the brief. So thank you so much. I'm very sorry for the low quality of the stream. Like I said, this will go up to YouTube very, very shortly. And I'd just like to thank our developers. I'm really proud of what they've been able to achieve over the last couple of years. Building a product like this takes hundreds of people. It's a significant effort, and it's all come together really well and on time. I hope that this has given you comfort that the VBS4 release in July will be ready for training. You can train anywhere on the earth. You can scale up to fairly massive echelons compared to VBS3, and it's also going to be extremely easy to use. And the idea is that it's usable by non-engineers. You can leverage the soldiers that you have without sending them on a training course to build some of this training content and accelerate the development of that content.